Hello. Now, I was attending a workshop this last weekend. I won't go into too much detail because it's not terribly relevant. It was actually on the subject of what bees can teach us about having a kind of universal consciousness. So, a spirituality kind of thing involving bees and nature, which I thought was really wonderful. But one of the questions that I raised in one of the little exercises that we were involved with was whether there is a sense of what it means to be in sisterhood or brotherhood that can be felt differently depending on whether you are in a male body or a female body, and perhaps also whether you are drawing on primarily what might be called masculine energies and feminine energies, something I've never really been able to get totally to the bottom of. And I particularly wondered whether being in a male body, I can experience sisterhood, particularly among female friends, and whether vice versa, someone who's in a female body, in a woman's body, can experience brotherhood. Now, here I'm talking not about strict blood relations, so the kind of relationship you would have with a birth brother or a birth sister. I've only had a birth brother, so I don't know what the experience is like in terms of a relationship with a sister. So I don't have an answer to this question. I thought I would see what might come up when I raise the question with AI. So putting the question into perplexity brought up a rather curious answer, I think, and perhaps a fairly stereotypical view, um, saying that both sisterhood and brotherhood signify deep connection and solidarity. So there's a lot of commonality there. Sisterhood is distinguished distinctly by focusing on women's relationships, which again is something I would question. And it says in this particular answer, often centers around empathy, empowerment, and collective advancement, whereas brotherhood tends to be associated with shared struggle, duty, loyalty, collective action, historically linked to male roles in public organized contexts. So I guess that's one way of looking at this, and perhaps it is the case particularly among male groups, traditional male groups, so military groups and so on, that there has been that sense of being in traditional cultures, the hunters, the gatherers, the fighters. There has been that sense of perhaps a common purpose. I'm not entirely sure. But here we have some emphasis on what sometimes are distinguished as feminine qualities, being particularly relevant for the notion of sisterhood. So emotional support, empathy, encouragement, mutual understanding, a conscious commitment to uplift, empower, and celebrate each other's achievements, and putting collective empowerment above the individual. Whereas brotherhood, it's suggesting as typical characteristics, again, loyalty very strong, mentorship, sense of duty towards the group, and focusing very much on shared activities, might be supporting a sports team, for example, or struggle, standing against challenges, often in external and social spheres. So again, aligning with traditional, if not, I would suggest very often these days, current roles. Brotherhood is historically associated with bravery, collective action, public engagement, such as in the military, labor, or political movements, found in fraternal orders, sports teams, and the like. That, at least, is according to what this particular search on Perplexity came up. So, bringing us back to some traditional labels, really, I I guess the one thing I would really, really love, both in my male mode as Clive, but also as Anya, is to experience a sense of sisterhood. I wish I could do that as Clive with my female friends. I have quite a few female friends, and whilst there isn't any kind of romantic element in those relationships, and typically the way I relate to my female friends is pretty transparent. It's not obviously different to my male friends. I do sense there is actually something that is slightly different, something slightly, again, not a romantic dynamic, but there is something that prevents perhaps this mutual acceptance of, let's call them the feminine traits, coming out and being, really coming to the fore. I think they do to some extent, but I can't honestly say that either I myself, and I suspect most of my female friends, ever get that sense of sisterhood with me, which I find a little bit disappointing. So I wish that wasn't the case. In terms of, do I get a sense of brotherhood with some of my male friends? Well, again, most of the time, there's no great difference. But probably yes, there probably are more of these kind of collective activities that I would engage in. Some conformity, as it were, to traditional roles. Anyway, one to ponder. I don't think there's an answer here, but I think if we can get anywhere near an answer, it might possibly tell us something about the distinctions we can make between what we might characterize as feminine and masculine. I would go down that road rather than what seemed to be the main focus in this perplexity response, the idea that what really distinguishes brotherhood or sisterhood is whether we are in male or female bodies.